Wow, the Ponds for just 5 episodes of Series 7?
No, sir. All 13!
So in my last video I spoke about the hypothetical question, what if Matt Smith's 11th Doctor stayed on for Series 8? I hoped by exploring this it would provide some redemption and closure to his less than stellar final series. But in that video I expressed how much I felt 11 did not work with Clara in Series 7, and that perhaps, in an ideal world, the 12th Doctor and Clara's Series 8 intact, it would have been better if the Ponds had simply stayed on for all 13 episodes of Series 7. I sincerely think the 11th Doctor is different to most other Doctors in that he didn't really work without his first set of companions. They were so intrinsically tied to him, they're the first face his face saw, the parents of his wife, they helped him battle the silence, and they were a married couple who literally lived out their honeymoon days aboard the TARDIS. The Doctor was Amy's imaginary friend, whose very existence defined her entire upbringing.
You're my friend. You're my best friend.
And so I think whilst a Doctor like 10 enjoyed a roster of companions, 11 would have been better off just keeping the Ponds around for his entire run. Series 7, the 50th anniversary, and his regeneration story in Time of the Doctor. I feel like dropping the silence storylines and the crack in time mysteries only served to hurt the end of 11's run, but with established companions in Series 7, I think it would have allowed Moffat to tie all these loose threads in a more satisfying, less rushed manner. Of course, it seems that the Ponds left because Karen Gillan and Arthur Darvill wanted out, which is fair enough. This what if scenario isn't as close to reality as Matt Smith staying on for Series 8, something he at one point confirmed and then seems to go back on. But either way, I think it would be fun to speculate. How would Series 7 work with the Ponds? How would the 11th Doctor's arc change? How would the stories have changed? What accompanying characters might have returned? What would change about Clara's introduction in time for the 12th Doctor and the next series? I want to delve into all that and find out. But before I get to all that, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Royal Match. Royal Match is a free-to-play Match 3 puzzle game. The game progresses as the player helps King Robert build and renovate his castle into a fun, vibrant, colourful one. Royal Match has endless variety, unique events and ways to progress, as well as an addicting gameplay loop that makes for a seamlessly fun experience. With thousands of levels, tremendous rewards, and various events and unique levels, Royal Match is the perfect way to give yourself the royal treatment. There are no ads, so you can enjoy the game without interruptions to relax and unwind. Both as a team and individually, you can compete for local and global championships. Royal Match is the perfect game to play to switch off and have a bit of me time. I really like just hitting all the icons and seeing it all match up and blow up. It's quite therapeutic, really. If you want to try out Royal Match for yourself and see what the hype is about, check them out through the link in my description below. No need for all the shallow change-ups. First up, an easy but important change. If the Ponds stick around, there's absolutely no need for all the pointless aesthetic changes in Series 7B. I don't mind the 11th Doctor's final outfit, but it does make him look a little bit like a sickly Victorian child. The waistcoat and timepiece are just a step too far in my opinion. It's a very busy outfit that looks a little like a parody of what the Doctor would wear. His original tweed jacket was perfection. At a push you could give him his Series 6 long coat for some variety in a couple of episodes, but let's stick to the aesthetic rather than needlessly changing it. The same goes for the TARDIS interior. Smith's first TARDIS suits him, his second does not. Not only did Capaldi's warmer orange lit variant work much better in Series 8 and beyond, it would have been so much better if it hadn't felt like an 11 hand-me-down. Deep Breath should have been the big reveal for this TARDIS. Series 7B still feels so estranged from the original Series A, and that is in part due to the Ponds, but it's also due to all these changes that were purely skin deep. Imagine how much more unified it all would have felt if all of these elements remained. The same goes for the title sequence. Crazy that this was only used for 9 episodes. I mean, what was the point? It was naff anyway. The aesthetics remaining the same would have helped everything, even if the series ended up being split. Speaking of which, give us an uninterrupted Series 7. Now I'm fully aware that this one was almost certainly beyond Moffat's control. The schedules for Series 6 and 7 were a mess, and it was only under Capaldi that we went back to full seasons playing out week to week. I imagine this alternate Series 7 would have probably still been released as 5 episodes in part 1, 8 episodes in part 2, with a Christmas special sandwiched in the middle. But if, for argument's sake, we have free reign to change all this tomfoolery, I'd say stick Series 7 in either 2012 or 2013. Whichever year doesn't get the series will get specials, just like in 2009 or like the year-long gap in 2016. Given the fact Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor would have to be in 2013, I think it would have made the most sense to have the full Series 7 in 2012 with 3 specials in 2013 for the 50th year. That means the Snowmen would be completely replaced. Yay! Improving lacklustre stories with the Pons chemistry. The Pons chemistry with 11 was so well developed that I'm going to make a bold claim. Having them in all of these Series 7B stories would have improved them tenfold, even if all that changed was their presence. The dynamic between 11 and Clara is so wafer thin, it's practically non-existent. Whenever I think of the Clara character, I think about her from Series 8 onwards. I think about her of the 12th Doctor. I never even think about all these impossible girl variants, because no one ever brings it up past Name of the Doctor. Hey Shielder, you know once I literally multiplied myself across the Doctor's whole lifespan, creating clones of myself that all died, and I never met a single one of them or did anything to avert their fate, and I never pondered the implications of cloning myself and essentially knowingly sending them to their deaths. It's kind of weird, right? Kind of weird that I never mentioned it as well. Oh well. Anyway, I just think having characters we actually know and love in stories like Hyde or Rings of Akaten or Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, would have made them so much better. Partly why I think that is that I don't think the quality of storytelling in Series 7A is leaps and bounds ahead of 7B, but I would rather watch that segment of this season every single time. It's vastly more entertaining, grounded in more emotional stakes, and actually has a sense of fun. And that's all because it's 11 and the Pons. The Silence and Madame Kovarian. Madame Kovarian, and really the whole Church of the Silence, fell away from 11's story, and that was flat. After 2 series of build-up, they simply went away in favour of blockbuster stories, and they were only half-heartedly brought up again in Time of the Doctor. I understand Moffat wanting to shift gears after the mixed reception to Series 6, but I kinda wish he had just kept on course and wrapped these threads up over time in Series 7. It doesn't help having the Pons leave, but if they're indeed staying the whole 13ep run, why not give us a little more of the Silence? I'd swap out the Great Intelligence for Madame Kovarian to give her a real chance to shine as a villain that we ultimately knew very little about. Smith never got a true nemesis, and the Great Intelligence, whilst played up deliciously by Richard E. Grant, wasn't around much to leave an impact. Why not just build on the foundations of Madame Kovarian and the Silence? It's all there because of Series 5 and 6. If we're leading up to Day of the Doctor where Gallifrey is restored, and then Time of the Doctor where the crack is revealed to be the Time Lords reaching out to 11, then it would have made sense to see the Silence ramping up their attack on the Doctor across Series 7. I know they thought he was dead, but they came back for his regeneration story anyway. Why not make everything feel less rushed? Plus the Pons and River already had a grievance with Kovarian after how she tormented their family unit, giving the companions a good final battle before their departure. Brian Williams. Introducing Rory's dad was one of the best things about Series 7A. Whilst I totally understood why Moffat shifted gears in Series 5 after all of the RTD companions' heavy focus on family, having Amy's parents forever absent could feel quite hollow at times. It was a nice mystery in Series 5, but in Series 6 it felt odd. We literally never see her parents ever again. Are they even ever mentioned? Maybe they're hanging out with Clara's variants. I liked that essentially instead of having a home base, Amy took her home family life with her in Rory, and it was a welcome change of pace. But by Series 7, once the Pons had somewhat returned to a normal life rather than living aboard the TARDIS, it didn't feel right to have both of their families excluded. Enter Brian.
What sort of a man doesn't carry a trowel?
Rory's dad brought a much needed new dimension to the Pons in their final string of episodes, grounding them in a way previously unseen. He was the highlight of both Dinosaurs on a Spaceship and The Power of Three. Had this series been one big stretch of 13 episodes of the Pons, it would have surely been expected that Brian would keep on popping up wherever there was a modern day Earth-set episode. In a way, I think Brian could have been the Wilf of the Moffat era, the intrepid and brave older everyman who would have flown with the Doctor had he met the Time Lord in his youth. Instead, he's just happy to come along for the ride on special occasions and watch his family take the leap. But unfortunately, with the ceremonious ousting of the Pons came the less ceremonious ousting of Brian. He gives his blessing for Amy and Rory to go off with 11 at the conclusion of The Power of Three, and then he is never seen or heard from again. Even after the Doctor loses the Pons in the 5th episode, he never returns to Brian on screen to tell him the bad news. There was in fact a deleted scene that would have had Amy and Rory's son turning up to meet Brian, ensuring he wouldn't be quite so alone. but it was scrapped. I understand the production might have prevented this from happening, but it feels like an insane choice. Brian never really gets an ending, he's just tossed to the wayside. For the average viewer, it felt incredibly cold of the Doctor to not check in, and incredibly cruel for Brian to have to suffer alone, never finding out what happened to his son or his daughter-in-law. Sure, that was turned into a webcast scene, but it's not within the actual show. If the Ponds were to stick around in Series 7, then Brian would definitely need some more screen time. Any excuse to stick him in there would be granted in my humble opinion, certainly a modern day story like The Bells of St. John, but what the hell, bring him along for another TARDIS trip. Something like Hyde or Nightmare in Silver could have benefited from his personality. And on that note, if we're putting more effort into the Ponds' wider world, River Song. I want to do a more comprehensive video on this character at some point. Let me know in the comments if you'd actually want to see that so I can gauge it. Anyway, the thing that bothered me about River Song's appearances in Series 7 is the lack of them. It really felt like after the mystery behind her was solved in the Series 6 finale, that her importance fell by the wayside. I always felt that was strange, and kind of echoed Moffat's usage of Amy's parents too. It was almost as if the mystery was the character, and he saw no point in featuring them after the fact. However, I have always felt like once you've revealed River is the Doctor's wife and the child of Amy and Rory, it would be nice to see her treated as such. The Doctor and the Ponds don't really explore this new paradigm. Aside from a few references in dialogue, nothing really changes.
Father dear, I think Mummy might need another drink.
Isn't that super weird? I mean, River is the Doctor's wife, but arguably more importantly, Amy and Rory's estranged daughter. I would have liked to have seen more texture to that relationship, especially after Amy and Rory's conflict in Asylum about having children in their future. What feelings of guilt would arise for both the Ponds because they missed out on raising River properly? Do they feel a sense of betrayal for growing up with her as Mel without ever knowing? Do they want to make more of an effort in the now, to be the family they want to be? And then this would tie in neatly with Brian. Brian is River's granddad. Wouldn't he care to meet her? Wouldn't River, a character ripped from her family during childhood, want to forge some kind of bond there? And to be honest, I'd be happy with the answer being no, but my point is it's never even explored. The Pond clan will act like River is their daughter on a technicality, and if that is the vibe, then what was ever the point of taking it there in the first place? So I think if the Ponds had stayed for the entirety of Series 7, then it would have been nice to include Brian and River in a more emotionally effective way. Have them both come along for more adventures. And have them meet each other. It's so odd that the last episode Brian turns up in is directly followed up by an episode in which his granddaughter appears. A Craig and Sophie follow-up. Another reason why Series 7B felt so divorced from the rest of Eleven's run was because we didn't check in on his unofficial extra companions. Craig, Sophie and Stormageddon.
Dark Lord of all.
Sorry, what?
That's what he calls himself.
Seriously, I love that we got to go check in on them in Series 6. I think Closing Time is a fun episode that's not as good as The Lodger, but a little bit underrated. Who would have thought James Corden could be so likeable? It worked really well for 11 to have an annual catch-up with the Stormageddon clan and see their lives move forward. I always feel like there's an alternate reality where Craig was 11's Donna Noble, the one-off companion that ended up coming back for his final season because the groundwork was laid in. Somehow, I think that would have worked better than the 11 Clara pairing. But for this paradigm, I'd be more than happy if Craig just got one more episode with 11 to tie it off as a trilogy. What if he was the companion in Nightmare in Silver, facing the Cybermen once again and finally getting to go off-world? You could have a teenage Alfie replace the annoying kids. It would also work as the late season breather for the Ponds. I'd also be happy with just another domesticated Earthbound adventure for 11 and Craig, but obviously there's no blueprint for that within the original Series 7. Ideas for this pairing, please. I've said this before and I'll say it again, Moffat had a weird thing for dumping supporting characters on a whim. Kate Stewart and Osgood never came back after Series 9 and are strangely absent during the Extremis 3-parter in Series 10. The Paternoster gang were shoved down our throats and then popped up once for 12 only to be absent for the rest of the showrunner's tenure without even a mention. Craig suffered the same fate, falling into obscurity after Series 6. I know it was a little melodramatic for 10 to revisit all of his companions in the end of time, but I think it shows that RTD understood the importance of giving the audience closure to key characters. Moffat's Doctor Who sees those kinds of characters vanish. I know the Doctor has a penchant for dumping people, but it doesn't really work as a satisfying end result for people like Craig, nor do I believe it was the artistic intent to evoke that feeling. I think Moffat just got bored of those characters or wanted to move on to something else and didn't feel like he had time for those things. The way he treats characters is basically the way he treated the Silence Madame Kovarian church chapter. As it stands in canon, Craig thought the Doctor was about to die and then never saw him again. How needlessly depressing and open-ended, 11 should have at least gone back and showed Craig he was A-OK, so this third story in the Pond-centred Series 7 would work a treat. And it would be really uplifting for Craig to see that the Doctor is alive, and it would be nice to have that towards the end of Smith's run. Clara's new role. I'm genuinely not sure whether to include Clara or not amongst the Ponds-heavy Series 7. I quite liked the reveal of having Clara in Asylum of the Daleks, and the question of her death was intriguing, but of course we know it amounts to very little. The idea of having different Claras popping up and meeting the Ponds throughout the series could be fun though, before introducing her as a full-time companion in Series 8. One idea I do like is simplifying a convoluted introduction for this character and just having her debut in Time of the Doctor. Since the Ponds are going to leave in the same episode as 11 now, why not make her a Trenzalore native? She meets the Doctor as he becomes that old man, and so when she offers to travel with him on the eve of his regeneration, he stays an old man. I like the idea of the Doctor giving her the chance to see the stars after living her whole life on Trenzalore, a place that was essentially under lockdown and at war. I don't even think it would be that weird going forward. She could easily get a job at Coal Hill. It's not like her life before meeting the Doctor is mentioned much in her Capaldi days anyway. I think it would be cool for her to meet 11 at the 11th hour and offer to give him some company in the wake of changing his face and saying goodbye to his old friends. At the very least, I think I'd rather see that than the whole Impossible Girl arc ever again. Day of the Doctor. I think the best reason why keeping the Ponds on would have been so awesome is because then the 11th Doctor would have had long-standing companions with him for the biggest decision of his tenure, reversing the end of the Time War. Whilst Day of the Doctor is the moment for me where Clara finally started to become a character, there's no denying it feels a little weird for a companion who's been around for less than a full series being thrown into this anniversary special. Clara got to be there because she was the companion at the time, which is fine, but I do think something would have been gained by having Amy and Rory there instead. Imagine their take on the decisions surrounding the moment, their meeting with the War Doctor, and in an especially fun twist, their meeting with Ten. User Passionate Errors pointed out in the comments of my last video that Amy would have recognised Ten's costume as the clothes of her Raggedy Doctor. It would have been neat for that to come full circle and have Amy see the Time Lord before he dropped out of the sky and into her life. Overall, I think it would make perfect sense for the Ponds to stick around for Series 7, leading straight into this momentous anniversary special. They knew the Doctor inside and out by the time of their departure, and I think it could have hit that much more. Clara wouldn't reach that level of familiarity with the Doctor until her Capaldi days. So in conclusion, I think swapping out the Ponds would be a vast improvement, even with the stories the way they are, merely postponing their final episode to the end of the run. Going back and even watching the Moffat-supervised Chibnall stories with this TARDIS team provides some fun, so I think Series 7 would have felt more in line with Series 5 and 6, even if that was the only change. I'm not going to a full episode run like I did last time, because I think some of these changes would dictate whole new episodes, but in short, if I was going to change more things, I would do the order like this. Episodes 1 to 4 would largely stay the same, sans Clara and the foreboding final scene of Power of 3. Angels Take Manhattan's purpose would be entirely void here, but why not still do a 1930s New York set Angels episode? Maybe some of those cool ideas in that story would actually get to play out. We move the Christmas special out of this run, airing it all continuously in 2012. That means the next 8 episodes largely stay the same, but we get Madame Kovarian and the Silence back in Bells of St. John and Name of the Doctor. They're focused on making sure the Doctor never learns the true purpose of the crack in time. Rings back a 10, Cold War, Hyde, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS and the Crimson Horror keep their threats and settings, but we see more of a window into the Pond's life, and Brian and River come along for a couple of separate episodes, teasing an eventual family reunion. Nightmare in Silver is the Craig, Sophie and Stormageddon episode, giving the Ponds a break. We get closure on 11's honorary companions, and the Craig clan get to go to space. Name of the Doctor is then the finale, with the Ponds discovering the Doctor's grave, having one last stand with Kovarian, and revealing the presence of the War Doctor, who will surely return in 2013's 50th year of Who. I don't think it's that important to have post-Library River here, since this goodbye is superseded by her special with Capaldi in 2015. I know this is their final chronological conversation, but I think it's also fine to have Husbands of River song be the Doctor's last meeting with her, since it comes after this anyway. This means that we can use River fully here, and for an important Christmas episode. Make the Christmas special a fun romp that is all about Brian meeting River, since Christmas is all about bringing the family together. With this special, Angels Take Manhattan, Name of the Doctor, and one episode in the original Series 7B, this brings River's episode count back up to her Series 5 days. And here something meaningful happens to her and the family she thought she could never have. The April special could be literally anything. I don't think it should be setting up Day of the Doctor. Naming Series 7 would have done enough, and it would be nice to get one last low stakes adventure in with Amy and Rory. Day of the Doctor is Day of the Doctor. Pretty much the same apart from the alterations I covered earlier in the video. Time of the Doctor. Instead of Amy and Rory living out the end of their days trapped in New York, they just do it with the Doctor. It's a nice code to the power of 3, with the Doctor doing more than just a year of seated life. The trio live to the end of their lifespans, defending the town called Christmas. We meet Clara, who grows up in their presence and bears witness to the Ponds peacefully passing away. For once, we get a happy companion exit that's more about how we must always let go naturally, but that is okay. The Doctor, satiated that they were able to live to old age, is also ready to go. But Clara reminds him that the people, not the politicians and bureaucrats, of Gallifrey need him to bring them home, and so he decides to accept the regeneration energy from the crack in time and start a whole new cycle, dedicating his next life to Amy and Rory, thus giving him a referential Scots accent to go with his older visage for Clara. Enter 12 and Clara's Series 8. Of course lots of little details would change, but in a broad sense this is how I'd imagine it going. I also think Amy and Rory would have to come into Trenzalore maybe in their 60s or something like that, because then you'd get an ample amount of time with Brian and River. There's no need for them to have to lose all that. I think they've suffered enough by the end of Series 7. And I think with all that, you'd lose the stop and start feeling of the original series. It would feel like a true continuation of Matt Smith's run, whilst also providing a feeling of closure as it hurtles towards his regeneration in Trenzalore. The Ponds defeat the Silence, they reverse the damage done to their daughter by giving her a grandfather and a home, and Clara enters the picture to help the Doctor move into the next life. What would you have done had the Ponds stayed for all of Series 7? Would you alter whole episodes? Would you keep the series split and do something different? How would River and Brian fit in? Let me know in the comments below, and yes, I am enthused by the idea of what if 9 did Series 2 and what if 10 did Series 5 videos, so I'll be working up those soon. A massive thank you to my latest full fat tier patron, Joseph Maltby. If you'd like to donate money to my Patreon, you can find me at patreon.com/fullfatvideos. If you'd like to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can find me at fullfatvideos.